What if the oceans, which we know as vast expanses of salty water, were completely different? Imagine a planet where the waves lapping at the shores were made of fresh water. It sounds surreal, doesn't it? But the consequences would be far deeper than we imagine. From marine life to the global climate, everything would be at stake. In today's video, we'll dive into this fascinating hypothesis and explore what the world would be like if the oceans were fresh water. Get ready to be surprised and rethink the importance of this natural balance we often take for granted. Drastic changes to marine life. If the oceans were freshwater, the impact on marine life would be catastrophic, completely transforming aquatic ecosystems across the planet. Salinity, which might seem like just a chemical detail, is actually crucial for the survival of countless species. Corals, marine fish, crustaceans, and even the ocean's largest creatures like whales depend on the salt balance to regulate vital functions such as osmoregulation, respiration, and reproduction. Without salt, most of these species simply wouldn't survive. For example, coral reefs, often referred to as the rainforests of the sea due to their biodiversity, would vanish. They cannot grow in fresh water as they require calcium and other minerals present in salt water to build their calcified structures. Without coral reefs, numerous species that rely on these habitats for shelter and food would also disappear. It's a domino effect. Small fish lose their homes, larger predators like sharks lose their prey, and the entire food chain collapses. Iconic marine animals like dolphins and sharks, which are adapted to saltwater environments, would go extinct. Sharks, for instance, have systems that balance salinity in their bodies, and without it, they would be unable to function. Whales, which migrate thousands of miles across the oceans to feed and reproduce, would also be severely impacted by the environmental shift. On the other hand, freshwater species might attempt to colonize the oceans. Fish like tilapia or catfish could spread, but they would face significant challenges such as extreme pressure and temperature variations in deeper regions. This means that, even with the change, oceans would not become viable habitats for most known species. The absence of marine life would also spell trouble for humans. Fishing, which supports millions worldwide, would collapse. Coastal economies dependent on marine biodiversity would be devastated. Seafood restaurants would become a rarity, and dishes like sushi, lobster, and shrimp would become things of the past. Ultimately, the transformation of salty oceans into fresh water wouldn't just require species to adapt. It would cause mass extinction, altering the planet's balance as a whole. Everything we know about the ocean would be rewritten, and not in a positive way. Changes to global climate patterns. If the oceans were freshwater, the global climate would face devastating and unpredictable changes. Currently, the salinity of the oceans plays a critical role in regulating ocean currents, which in turn directly influence climate patterns worldwide. Without this salinity, currents like the Gulf Stream could slow down or even stop altogether, leading to extreme climate impacts. For example, the Gulf Stream helps keep Western Europe's climate mild despite its high latitude. If this current were disrupted, countries like the UK and France could experience much harsher winters, while tropical regions might face unbearable heat increases. Furthermore, extreme weather events such as hurricanes would be significantly altered. Without ocean salinity to balance thermal energy, hurricanes could become less frequent, but much more intense when they do occur. The hydrological cycle would also be profoundly affected. Without salinity, ocean evaporation would be less efficient, leading to an uneven redistribution of moisture across the planet. Some regions would face prolonged droughts, while others would endure constant flooding. Imagine deserts rapidly expanding while already humid areas become nearly uninhabitable due to flooding. Another major consequence would be the reduction of the ocean's thermoregulatory effect. Salt water has unique properties that allow it to store and redistribute heat around the globe. Freshwater lacks this capability, leading to dramatic temperature fluctuations between day and night in many regions. Extreme temperatures would become the new norm, making survival even harder for terrestrial and aquatic species alike. These climatic changes would also have severe consequences for agriculture. Regions that currently rely on stable climates to grow food would face increasing difficulties, resulting in global food crises. Coastal areas, already struggling with rising sea levels due to global warming, would face additional challenges from climatic instability and potentially accelerated polar ice cap melting. The planet's climate balance is an intricate and interdependent system. Any significant alteration, such as turning salty oceans into freshwater, would trigger a chain reaction of disastrous events. The result would be an almost unrecognizable planet, with hostile and unpredictable weather conditions making survival for humans and other species a monumental challenge. Impacts on agriculture and drinking water. If the oceans were freshwater, the consequences for agriculture and the supply of drinking water would be immense, bringing both apparent benefits and catastrophic challenges. On one hand, converting the seas into an almost unlimited source of freshwater could solve water crises in many parts of the world. However, the ecological and economic cost would be far too high to ignore. One positive impact would be the end of the need for desalination plants in arid regions. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel, which depend on desalination to meet their potable water demands, could redirect resources to other areas of development. This would also mean greater water availability for irrigation, potentially expanding agricultural production in places where drought is a persistent problem. In theory, this could reduce hunger in many parts of the world. However, the negative impact on environmental balance far outweighs the potential benefits. Without the salinity of the oceans to stabilize the water cycle, coastal regions could suffer from the flooding of fertile lands, as aquatic ecosystems would become more volatile. For example, farmland near coastlines could be inundated, destroying crops and causing incalculable damage to global food security. Moreover, many terrestrial ecosystems near coastal zones rely on the balance between fresh and salt water. Mangroves, for example, which act as natural barriers against storms and help preserve biodiversity, would disappear. Without them, agricultural areas near these regions would be more vulnerable to natural disasters such as hurricanes and tsunamis. Another alarming factor is that the excess fresh water in the oceans could accelerate the melting of glaciers and polar ice caps. This would result in a rise in sea levels, submerging vast fertile coastal areas and displacing entire populations. Thus, instead of having more land available for cultivation, we would lose existing arable lands to the waters. From an economic perspective, changes to the oceans would also disrupt global markets. While some areas might benefit from increased freshwater availability, others would suffer from the scarcity of marine resources such as seafood, which are also essential to many economies. Overall, food prices would rise, exacerbating economic and food security crises. Therefore, while the idea of freshwater oceans might seem like a magical solution to water and agricultural issues, in practice, it would create a cycle of environmental and economic devastation. The interdependence of terrestrial and aquatic systems is delicate, and such a drastic change would have far-reaching impacts on all aspects of life on Earth. Sea level rise. If the oceans were freshwater, sea levels could rise rapidly and uncontrollably, bringing catastrophic consequences for coastal cities and entire countries. This is because freshwater freezes and melts differently than saltwater. The salinity in today's oceans contributes to thermal balance, slowing the melting of polar ice caps. Without this salinity, ice in regions such as the Arctic and Antarctica would melt faster, releasing large volumes of water into the oceans. Imagine entire cities like New York, Tokyo, or Rio de Janeiro being swallowed by the sea. The resulting rise in sea levels would not only threaten urban infrastructure, but also force millions of people to abandon their homes, creating a global climate refugee crisis. Island nations such as the Maldives would completely disappear from the map. Additionally, agricultural and industrial areas near coastlines would be flooded, compromising the production of essential goods and food. This scenario would affect not only developed countries but also developing nations, which have fewer resources to deal with large-scale natural disasters. The loss of fertile land would also result in food shortages and rising prices, deepening social and economic inequalities. A historical example illustrating the impact of rising sea levels is the Khmer civilization, whose capital, Angkor, was affected by changes in water patterns that led to its decline. Now imagine this on a global scale. With billions of people facing the consequences of a radical climate change caused by freshwater oceans, coastal ecosystems would also be drastically affected. Mangroves, which are crucial for protecting coasts against storms, would be destroyed by reduced salinity, leaving regions even more vulnerable. Furthermore, the biodiversity of these areas, including seabirds and fish, would vanish, creating a domino effect on the food chain. In summary, the rise in sea levels in a world with freshwater oceans would be an unprecedented crisis. Humanity would have to invest trillions of dollars in barriers and technology to mitigate the damage, but solutions would be limited. The planet as we know it would change irreversibly. Significant economic changes. If the oceans were freshwater, the economic impact would be profound and transformative. The global economy, which depends on marine resources, maritime transportation, and coastal tourism, would face a dramatic upheaval, with entire sectors collapsing while others would emerge unexpectedly. The fishing industry, one of the most affected, would collapse almost instantly. Without salinity, marine biodiversity would be drastically reduced, leading to the extinction of several fish and seafood species that sustain millions of people worldwide. Countries whose economies heavily rely on seafood exports, such as Japan, Norway, and Chile, would face severe economic crises. Restaurants serving fish and seafood-based dishes, such as sushi, lobsters, and shrimp, would need to reinvent themselves or close down. On the other hand, sectors like water treatment might experience a decline. With freshwater oceans, expensive desalination technologies would become obsolete, saving billions of dollars in countries that depend on these technologies for water supply. However, the abundance of freshwater would also bring logistical challenges, such as its distribution to remote areas and the impact on existing irrigation systems. Furthermore, coastal tourism would face major impacts. Imagine tropical beaches without the vibrant blue of saltwater or the marine biodiversity that attracts divers and tourists. With the extinction of coral reefs and other marine species, iconic tourist destinations such as the Great Barrier Reef would become underwater deserts. Local economies relying on tourism would face immense challenges in attracting visitors. Maritime transportation would also undergo significant changes. Freshwater has a different density than saltwater, which could affect the navigability of large cargo ships. Transportation costs could increase due to the need to adapt vessels to the new oceanic conditions. This, in turn, would drive up the prices of internationally transported goods, resulting in global inflation. Finally, the loss of natural marine resources, such as salt and minerals extracted from the ocean, would create difficulties for industries relying on these raw materials. Salt, for example, is used in food preservation, and industrial processes. Without it, alternative sources would need to be found, increasing production costs across various supply chains. In summary, freshwater oceans would not only alter global ecology, but also deeply disrupt existing economic structures. What might seem like a solution to water issues could actually trigger an unprecedented global economic crisis. The hypothesis of oceans made of fresh water forces us to rethink how interconnected our planet truly is. From the drastic transformation of marine ecosystems to extreme climate changes, global economies, and daily life, it becomes clear that the natural balance of the oceans is essential for life on Earth. While the idea of abundant fresh water initially seems positive, the cascading consequences show that every element of our planet is connected in ways we cannot ignore. Do you agree with the conclusions described? Is there anything you think was left out or deserves more attention? Leave your suggestions in the comments. We'd love to hear your ideas. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep exploring fascinating topics like this. Check out the video that's now appearing on your screen. Together, let's explore the possibilities and mysteries of our incredible planet.